Kia ora, I'm Alexia Russell, and today on The Detail, a tale of shipwrecks, pirates and buried treasure. Rubies, opals, sapphires and diamonds, rings, watches, pendants, cufflinks, scattered and buried in mud 35 metres deep off the North Island's east coast.
My most recent treasure search has been for the Rothschilds' jewellery on the 1897 wreck of the SS Tasmania.
That's the voice of New Zealand's famous diving pioneer, Kelly Tarleton. He bought the rights to the wreck of the Tasmania and in the 1970s salvaged 250 pieces of jewellery worth about $250,000, which had belonged to a distant relative of the Rothschild banking family. It's one of the many stories told about him in RNZ's award-winning podcast, Kelly Tarleton's Final Treasure Hunt.
I found the wreck 2.5 miles offshore, half buried in the sand and lying in 100 feet of water. Although the ship was draped with trawl nets and badly corroded, I was hopeful we would find Rothschild's cabin still intact, but to our dismay found his cabin had broken up and completely disappeared. All we found was a patch of tile floor to mark the spot where his cabin had been. Everything else had gone over the side and lay buried out in the open sand. Somewhere, not far from this patch of tile floor, lies a suitcase with $100,000 worth of jewellery in it.
I'll tell you what happened next later in the podcast, but the reason we're dredging up history is because over the summer there have been accusations that divers are dredging up something else, scavenging on a wreck that doesn't belong to them. According to a story in Stuff, there's been a police report and an investigation is underway. So, are our sunken ships being plundered?
Take what you can. Give nothing back.
Garth MacIntyre is an adventurer and diver based in Wellington. His interest lies more in the stories of the people who were on those ships than the treasure that may still be there.
I've been in diving circles for probably 50-odd years as a recreational and a commercial diver, and I took interest in our shipwreck history, and I've had a lot to do over the years with discovering wrecks and diving on some of these historic wrecks. I was taught and learnt my trade, so to speak, under the likes of Malcolm Blair, Willie Bullock, Kevin Kelly Carlton. So I'm probably one of the last ones standing in terms of understanding shipwrecks and him having that interest in our shipwreck history.
Garth's family holiday home is on probably the nearest piece of land to the wreck of the Tasmania.
Yes, we've got a beach house up there, and it's dived regularly by numerous recreational divers and probably predominantly spear fishermen who free dive over the wreck, because the wreck in its own right acts like an artificial reef and draws in a lot of fish life. So it's a spectacular dive when the conditions allow you to dive it. So yes, as a spear fisherman and as an avid wreck diver, it's a great location.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about some of the issues around this, because you just have just pointed out there are like a lot of people there all the time. Who has the rights to take whatever is left on the Tasmania?
Well, look, it's not that often that the conditions are right, because most shipwrecks go down in bad locations. The northern aspect of where the wreck is open to the southerly swells that come around there. But effectively, back in the day, shipwreck, if you found a shipwreck, I'm talking in the 60s and 70s, going way back, when diving first became a thing with fever tanks, etc., you could actually buy wrecks off the insurance companies. So back in the day, wrecks went down. Hopefully people didn't lose their lives, but more often than not they did, certainly through the 1800s and 1900s. So if you saw a wreck that you particularly wanted to find, and you did find it, and it had something of value maybe, or just general interest, you could buy the wreck from the owner at the time, and invariably that owner was the insurance company, because they'd paid out the original shipping company, for the wreck. So back in those days, in particular, the Tasmania was bought by Kelly Tarleton back in the 70s off the owner of the wreck, who I think I'd have to go back through the record, was from Rothschilds, because the Rothschilds jewels were being carried on by Rothschilds at the time, who was a jeweller, coming out to fellas' wares and jewellery in New Zealand. So the wider family still had the ownership, I believe, and it was that wider family that Kelly Carlton bought the wreck.
So hang on, this is the Rothschild family.
Well, it's a branch of it, Alexia. So a lot of interesting cargoes did come, and those that attracted interest were cargoes where there was jewellery or gold or silver, and they were the particular wrecks for someone like Kelly Carlton, with some of the divers I've just mentioned before, that we thought, damn it, let's try and find these wrecks. And in Kelly's case, he wanted to start his own heritage site and put it out there for the public as general interest. So he bought the wreck off the Rothschild family, I believe, and he then had the right at that stage to dive on it and recover the cargo, or I think in that case, the jewellery, which is of prime interest for Kelly.
Can you tell me a bit more about the Tasmania? How many people lost their lives, and were there any survivors?
Well, no one died as a result of the ship sinking. They actually died as a result of getting into the rescue boats, lifeboats, and when they got to shore, because of the big southerly running, the swell or the crashing waves rolled the life rafts over and people drowned. So they were within touching distance of the shore. Back in those days, they wore quite thick, heavy, clumsy clothing, and a lot of the people couldn't swim. So as the boats rolled over in the pit, people drowned. But no one actually died as a direct result of the ship sinking.
And what else was on board apart from those jewels? Do we know?
Well, sadly, there were horses. There was some high-value horses, and they all obviously drowned. There were stories of the horses making a hell of a noise on board as they were going down and kicking and breaking things on board. There was some of the survivor accounts had horrific stories of listening to the animals obviously go down with the ship. There was axe handles, I think there was Bibles, there was newspapers, all sorts of odds and ends carried, but primarily most ships, most wrecks or most of the shipping around New Zealand here carried a lot of booze. So you could always find a lot of spirits and alcohol on board, generally on a lot of the old early ships. I think someone found a horse skull, I think at some stage, that's been uncovered when they were doing the jewellery excavation. So generally bones don't last, and I know this is a bit gruesome, but they don't last in those active environments. So shipwrecks in the Tasmania is probably a little bit different because it's on a flat bottom, not on a shallow reef where most wrecks are in shallow water and being pounded by the waves or currents or tide. Generally, bones don't last. They disintegrate or just get washed away.
We're basically shoveling the rubble that was in the bottom of the hole into a 200-litre oil drum. Then it got taken up to the boat, and we had a big washing platform on the back of the boat, and we washed it, and there was the Rothschild jewellery glinting at you.
And did Kelly Talton get some of that jewellery out?
He did. So Kelly was very successful. He had a great team, Steve McIntyre, Willie Bullock, Ingrid Losh. They dived over a series of seasons over the, probably really from early to mid-70s. And Kelly was very industrious, very great diver, and had a great diving brain for problem solving. And if you're a commercial diver, problem solving underwater is always a great attribute to have, and he had that. So he worked that wreck, and primarily in the 70s with that crew, and they recovered, I would say, about 30% of the known jewellery there with the cargo. So there's probably still 70% left there, but, as I've said before, the Tasmania lies in 35 metres. It's not diveable that often, and if you are going to try and recover more of the jewellery or get other artefacts, you have to know what you're doing. You have to be well set up. So the general recreational diver going to 35 metres in terms of safety these days would be seen as a deep dive, and there wouldn't be many people unless you're a commercial outfit with the right equipment that could actually work on that wreck to recover the jewellery or be well set up. So it'll be quite a big undertaking, and Kelly and co did that really well back in the 70s.
So if you were just like Joe Bloggs walking, into your boat and diving over the side, and, knew what you're doing, but you weren't set up for a proper survey or anything, how long would you have to explore the wreck in that deep water before you had to come up again?
I would say 15 minutes.
Right, not a lot of exploring time.
No. I mean, primarily divers go out there to fish, line fish on the surface, or they spearfish. There's a keen spearfishing fraternity up there. Or you put a dive tank on and you can shoot fish on the wreck, because as I've said before, it's a great diet as an artificial reef for attracting kingfish, snapper, karakihi, all of that, those species of fish. So it is a magnet for fish. But you did right. It doesn't give you much bottom time when you're a recreational scuba diver to get down there.
What is stopping someone from doing a proper deep dive and a more thorough exploration to try and get whatever else is down there up?
Well, look, there's an outfit up there at the moment who's trying to get the propeller off the vessel. They've been trying for 15 years with all sorts of heavy equipment, compressors, dive pumps, and so forth. And it's quite a serious operation, and they haven't been successful to date. It's a big job. The thought was issues with just mechanical issues and working underwater. So for a recreational diver to have any effect on retrieving much on the wreck is quite negligible, really. And I think, to be honest, over the years, there's been dozens of divers that have dived at a recreational level. We've probably packed up bottles in the old plate, I think, because you've got to understand the dynamics of what happens out there on the bottom through storms in the winter, going through, sediment will be deposited on the wreck and bury it somewhat, but other times those same ground soil will uncover the wreck. So you can potentially go down and see all sorts of, cargo boxes or artefacts lying there. And I can guarantee if you're a recreational diver and you throw a bottle or a piece of the cargo or whatever, 99% of the time you take it back and show your family or your friends and say, look, I've got a bottle off the wreck of the Tasmania. But and celebrate and what it is that probably it made earlier to anyone except you finding something of interest.
Yeah, a little souveniring thing.
Yeah, but pretty much.
Yeah.
But I think for my type of interest in shipwrecks, and there's some 2,500 shipwrecks been recorded around our coast.
2,500?
Yes, since records began. You look into the New Zealand Shipwreck Bible, I suppose you could call it. There's a book that's been printed by C.W.N. Ingram. He started it way back in the 50s, I think, or 40s, and recorded to date and updated by Linton Diggle as of 5 years ago, the 2,500 wrecks. So for me, it's the wider interest for shipwrecks, and as I said before, their design, the immigrants that came out on them, the cargoes. And I think what Kelly tried to do in these is with a heritage site out of the Bay of Islands, which now unfortunately doesn't exist. That's the real pay, I think, that if you are trying to discover new wrecks or look at existing wrecks, if you can ultimately recover items and put them up for public display, that's where I believe the interest back to the general New Zealand people and tourists alike. There's some great stories to be had.
So I told you I'd let you know what happened to the jewels. Kelly Tarleton did have them on display in his shipwreck museum in Waitangi until they were stolen in 2000, along with other precious artefacts from other shipwrecks. The loot has never been recovered, and the museum itself was destroyed by fire last year.
We're a real tragedy, really, because it was such a great heritage site or repository to display these artefacts.
Yeah. So you can buy a shipwreck, but what are the rules, the government regulations around retrieving stuff from the wrecks?
Well, Basically, over the years, and I'm talking probably the 50s and 60s, let's say, it used to be the Ministry of Transport had a section called the Receiver of Wreck. So if you discovered a shipwreck, and some of those early wrecks were in shallow water when diving became a thing, and you had to report it to the Receiver of Wreck. So you then notified the authorities that you found a wreck at whatever age it was, and it was noted down, and then you could apply to recover material off it or disturb the wreck. Now that then morphed into latter years into the New Zealand Historic Places Trust. They then took over the mantra of the Receiver of Wreck, and it fell under the marine archaeology side. So you've got the land-based terrestrial archaeology, which is what primarily most archaeology in this country is overseen by what was then New Zealand Historic Places Trust, but an arm of that was the marine archaeology side of it. And probably, I can't remember how many years ago, that then morphed into the Ministry of Culture and Heritage. So they oversaw, to say, shipwreck, but with specific clause, I suppose you could say, that all wrecks older than 1900 were to be protected. So if you found a wreck that was in 1895 or whatever, you would have to notify, could notify the Ministry of Culture and Heritage and say you found this wreck. And if you wanted to disturb the wreck to recover items, you had to get the necessary consent and permit to do that.
Even if you own it?
Well, no. Well, even if you own it, you still have to get consent because it's deemed to be of historic significance. Now, you have to define what is historic and what is significant, but let's just say that is the law, and even if you own the wreck, you still have to apply for a consent or a permit to disturb the wreck. So most, 99.9% of recreational divers would have no idea this law exists. And if you manage to even dive on one of these wrecks and understand what you're looking at, because the wrecks are being disintegrated, they've broken down, they look like rocks half the time. But if you happen by chance to find an artifact, 99.9% of the time you'd probably pick it up and take it home as a souvenir. And you'd be oblivious of the laws surrounding pre-1900 wrecks. So anything younger than 1900 is not applicable to the law, but anything older than 1900 falls under that law and governance of the Ministry of Culture and Heritage.
And you were saying you've dived on the Tasmania?
Yes, many, many times. So I mainly go out there and spearfish. It's a great wreck to dive. It's a magnet for fish. And look, you can see, looking into the bones of the wreck, you can understand the decking, the stern. It's kind of half or probably 2/3 buried, I suppose. But storms wash through and you can still see the tip of the propeller. You can still see packing cases where cargo would have been. You see the old bottles strewn around on the bottom, broken bits of ceramic. But generally, there's probably not much on the wreck unless you've got a commercial operation where if you did want to pursue the jewels of Rothschilds, good luck. You'd need to spend a lot of money to do that and have the right equipment. But it is a spectacular dive when you do dive it and when the conditions allow that.
Like, do you have to actually get permission to go out there or only consent to take things?
No, anyone can dive the wreck. It's not that's not what I'm saying in terms of the law. The law is if you disturb, you find a bottle, theoretically you're not allowed to take it because it should stay on the wreck unless you've got a consent to take part of the cargo or work a certain section of the ship. So any diver can go out there and dive on it for interest's sake and observe the wreck. Not a problem. And it goes to any wreck in the country, whatever age.
Has anyone ever worked out sort of the value of stuff on the ocean floor around New Zealand? On wrecks?
Oh, I think there's not really any significant treasure wrecks around the country. I I think you have to. The general grant has always been one.
The general grant is widely acknowledged amongst wreck hunters as the wreck to find in the South Pacific. And there's a couple of reasons. The first reason is probably because there's quite a lot of gold on board. And there's shipwrecks and gold, it's got that. But I think the other reason is where it is and the whole nature of the sinking and the subsequent rescue. The whole thing was such an adventure, but it's an adventure that's packaged around sunken treasure.
I went down 3 years ago in an expedition that we mounted to try and find a general grant. We got permission from the Ministry of Culture and Heritage and a letter supporting our expedition. But again, if we'd found the wreck, we'd have to report it and go through the necessary permitting and consent process. But that had gold to the value, I think, today of about probably $4 or $5 million on it. So, when you look at what that represents, people think it's a huge trove of gold. It's actually probably the size of 2.5 shoeboxes in terms of volume. Mm-hmm. So it's not very much when you're looking for a needle in a haystack of trying to find a wreck that sank in 1866. So
still if you found it, you'd be quite happy about that.
Oh, look, you'd be over the moon. But I think someone said to me the other month, there's more money being spent on expeditions looking for it than the value of the gold. And I think really that it's more the interest play for those that are interested in shipwrecks or even trying to discover new shipwrecks. It's really the intrinsic historical value that it could bring to the New Zealand public. And I mean, look, we've been trying for a number of years to look at a heritage site that could, display a number of artefacts from collections that have some of the old-time divers. There's a lot of material out there that's been collected over the decades, and it ultimately either goes to the scrap metal or goes to second-hand shops and loses its provenance. We don't have an old history here, so we know most things about the wrecks that have gone down in terms of their design and probably what they're carrying. But it's still a real buzz and a real thrill to be able to try and find these wrecks and document them. Video record them. There's so much great technology out there now to relate it to the general public, and we're seeing more and more of it. That's what kind of keeps driving me and the small group of people that are still interested in endeavouring to find some of these deeper water wrecks or revisit the shallow water wreck.
Thanks, Garth. That's Garth MacIntyre, diver and shipwreck explorer. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Jeremy Ansell. And I'm Alexia Russell. Ka kite.